assuming they call these say anything back to me. Could we get there? So I'm just spitballing here if we have a minute still before we start.
Hold on one second. We're going to go live right now.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is LaTanya Reeves, and I'm the chair of the Community Commission on Police Oversight. Before we begin, I want to offer a friendly reminder to all members, staff, and the public that these meetings are broadcast live to enable greater public participation. These broadcasts include real-time captioning as a further method to increase the accessibility of our proceedings to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful of the rate of their speech so that our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask all speakers to moderate the speed and clarity of their comments. At this time, I'm going to call to order the special meeting for Tuesday, August 19th, and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Commissioner McElhenney.
Present.
Shanfield.
Present.
Newman is absent. Clement is absent. Palmer.
Present.
Baker.
Present.
Stewart is absent. Zyla.
Present.
Kennedy.
Present.
Bartz.
Present.
Enderly is absent. Williams Johnson.
Present.
And Smith is absent. Vice Chair Olson.
Present.
And Chair Reeves.
Present.
There are 10 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. I would like to welcome Commissioner Zyla to the commission. If you'd like to say a couple words, you're welcome to.
Well, I'm brand spanking new. I'm an electrician by trade and thought I would give this a try. I'm very excited to work with all of you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Welcome. Our first item today is the order of public comments. We'll open the floor to any comments about the discipline matrix from the public, giving each speaker 2 minutes to address the commission. We'll be taking speakers in the order that they've registered. If you wish to address the commission tonight and haven't already done so, you may register with the clerk at the side of the dais. If any speaker has printed materials, please give them to the city clerk. We also invite folks to submit written comments using the forms available from the city clerk to be included in the public record as an alternative to speaking at tonight's comment section. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to address the commission tonight. We have a timer to assist speakers in monitoring their use of time. Please keep in mind that comments must be related to the Minneapolis Police Department's discipline matrix. Also, a reminder that members of the public are always welcome and encouraged to submit individual feedback on the discipline matrix. Policy materials and feedback submission instructions are available on the Minneapolis City website. With that, I'll open the public comment period. Our first speaker tonight is David Becking.
Hello. I'd like to say that for the MPD to win an employment arbitration, it's extremely important for it to have a fair and consistent discipline matrix applied consistently. So I appreciate how you've taken a look at other cities. I'm curious as to whether you have looked at past discipline matrices from Minneapolis. I was on the Civilian Review Authority when the first discipline matrix was passed in 2009. It was quite good, not perfect. The problem with it was that it was never applied. They changed it, they gave their reset statement, and then there was no discipline, so we went right back where we had been. In 2011, there was another version that improved also. But I've looked at this current version, and frankly, I think there is no hope of saving it. It needs to be discarded and started over. If you look at those previous ones, they were clear. They had the different policy numbers outlined. They were something easy to work with. They weren't 24 pages long. They weren't something that officers would have a hard time making sense of. So I appeal to you to throw that out and start over again with something a lot better. 2 points just to illustrate what the problems are in this. Under this section on the chief's decision, it says the MPD chief makes discipline decisions based solely on the information contained in the investigative report and case file, investigative findings, the facts and circumstances, and the presence of mitigating or aggravating factors, and the application of any progressive discipline policy. I don't know if you've noticed, but this explicitly avoids decisions based on the CCPL reviews. That has to go.
Thank you.
How can you let that happen?
Thank you, sir, for your time.
And if I could just, because there's so few speakers, just say also, in that same paragraph, it talks about the chief basing circumstances, based on circumstances of the situation, and documented in writing by the MPD chief. Who sees that written document? It doesn't say.
Mr. Bicking, I would ask you to put any more comments in writing, sir.
Do you see who that document goes to? In the CRA, the chief had to report back to us in a closed meeting to the entire commission.
Mr.
What
Bicking.
were his reasons?
Mr.
I
Bicking.
yield my time to Mr. Bicking.
Okay, thank you very much. So she's yielded her time. She is
Okay.
the next speaker. If we want to do an additional 2 minutes.
Yeah,
All right.
just a
Thank you.
little bit here.
Okay.
I hope you take a good look at this, the details, but I think the details will show that there is way too much missing. It's vague, and it's not fair to the public, and it's not fair to the officers, frankly, to have a discipline matrix which is so hard for them to go through and truly understand. So based on that, I really hope you'll start over. And if you don't have a copy of the older Minneapolis discipline matrices, we'd be happy to provide them for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional speakers? No more? Okay. All right. Seeing no further speakers, we'll close the public comment. The next order of business is reports. The Police Policy Research and Recommendations Committee will be comparing the Minneapolis Police Department's discipline matrix with other cities. I will ask the chair, Commissioner Shanfield, to start us off. Yep, we're going to do a flip.
Chair, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. And thank you, members of the public, for being here. We're really delighted. Mr. Bicking, thank you for your comments. Looking forward to engaging here with the discipline matrix. Just wanted to invite people to use the norms that we use at the Police Policy Recommendations Review and Recommendations Committee. We talk about showing up, which I'm really glad that there are so many of us here, and as well in the public. Sharing the air, so we're hoping to hear from everyone tonight. And also assuming positive intent. If someone misunderstands what you're saying, we'll take responsibility for the impact and also clarify. So giving people a chance for dialogue tonight. Really looking forward to that. We're here tonight to look at the new discipline matrix, which is out for public review and public comment. This really matters, especially for the CCPO, because those of us who have sat on panels, on discipline review panels, use this matrix each time we sit on a review panel. Not all of us on the commission here yet have sat on the panels, and so I think it's important just to provide a little bit of context here tonight. The settlement agreement mandates changes to the discipline matrix, so that is why we have a new draft. Our goal tonight is for the body to discuss what should be included in the matrix. So any concerns, such as we've heard in public comment, we'll be taking note of, and also our discussion amongst ourselves. Any comments that are made, we'll take the notes here tonight, and we'll review them at PPRR on Monday and finalize the recommendations. So I want to also thank you to the public and thank you to folks who have submitted comments via the police policy feedback at minneapolismin.gov email address, as the chair mentioned. Thank you for doing that. That is open until August 29th, so please continue to submit your comments. Doing so en masse helps and it matters a lot. So tonight, before we dive in, everybody has, here up on the dais, we have the matrix starting on page 2 of your agenda packet. It's blue. I would invite everybody to go ahead and just number the pages right now, so in case we're reviewing. So the front cover page we won't count, but starting on the inside, let's number that 1, and then so on, so that in case we're trying to figure out what page people are talking about, it will be easy to do so. That is recommendation number 1 for the discipline matrix, is to number the pages. 6, 7, whoever does it first can tell me exactly how many pages there are. 10. Mr. Bicking, I think, said there was 24. 13, 14. $23, and then the cover is probably 24. So that last page should be a 23. Perfect. Thank you, Commissioner Palmer. So we're going to engage tonight. The comparison we're using is the most recent discipline matrix from 2023, which is sometimes the one that we use on the panels if the case has taken place since September 15th, 2023. This is the process I'd like to propose, is that we'll give each member from PPRR, if they would so choose, a chance to offer any initial thoughts, because we've done some homework and looked at matrices and discipline processes from other cities. So any commissioner who has the opportunity to do that, would like to share, we'll do that. We'll just go in alphabetical order from PPRR. Then open it up for a free-form discussion, and I'd love to hear from everyone. Please focus on your concerns. So any concerns, that's what we're going to be taking note of so that we can pull those notes together and share them, as well as any suggestions. If you have a concern and you think there's a way to do it better, feel free to offer that as well. And then at the very end, I would like to offer an opportunity to do a final closing comment from everyone, just to hear, in case, to make sure everyone's voice is heard and people have thoughts around discussions. Once you've spoken, you might have another thought afterwards. Does that sound acceptable, Chair? Okay. Yes. All right, wonderful. So it's going to go in this order: Bartz, Baker, Kennedy, Williams, Johnson, Olson, Shanfield. You're welcome to pass, but that's the projected order. Does that sound all right? How's that? Great. I'm going to open it up with you, Commissioner Bartz. Thanks.
Thank you. I originally intended to look at Seattle, but it actually appears that Seattle does not have a discipline matrix. So I pulled up another rival city, Portland, and found what I thought is a very concise and good matrix. Well, first of all, I should say that these appear that they originated in a similar matrix or a similar template, and I think the main difference is that the MPD draft is it's kind of like a blown up version of Portland's. It's very expansive, as you all know now. And while I found certain things about MPD's draft good as a civilian, like it had good definitions, explanations, and directions, I agree with the speaker that it's a bit long and unwieldy. I did also notice, though, that in general, the discipline, like the lengths of suspensions, for example, in the MPD draft are actually equal to or longer than the Portland's. So I thought that was interesting. Again, our draft is a bit like, they're similar, but Portland's, I'll pass this down. Portland's is consolidated into 2 pages, their actual table. But I found that the way they did it is actually very understandable. Again, as a civilian, I figured this out in about 5 minutes. So that's the strength of Portland's. At the same time, other than their ability to fit in examples in each category, examples of violations, which is really helpful, there's not much linking it to their policies. So they make reference to the policies in a footnote, but also, as the speaker pointed out, it seems a bit weak on linking these discipline categories to actual policies. And I think that the MPD draft has a good start with that, but again, the way it's formatted is a bit unwieldy. So I think those are my main points. I'll stop there. You want to pass that down?
Commissioner Baker, please.
So I reviewed Newark. Similarly, Newark is much shorter for the actual discipline matrix. They don't have exactly the same categorizations, and so some areas were a little hard to compare. The biggest one that there was a discrepancy between Newark and MPD is Newark had a mandatory, hold on, let me pull up that note that just closed. Newark treated failure to appear in court as a much higher level than we are. And given the amount of effort I imagine it takes to get to a court date, it seems like we should probably treat not showing up as a fairly high. Obviously, if there are extenuating circumstances, that would mean that they didn't violate the policy, but, you know, if they just blow it off, we should probably treat that fairly seriously. I do have some concerns, as others have expressed, of the complexity of this, and the fact that it is not numbered and cross-referenced to actual policy violations. Many of the titles seem more like descriptions, and some of them are titles, and I think the policy should be described in the policy, and then it should just be listed, and this should just be the discipline matrix, not a policy summary, because there's going to be differences between the 2 versions over time. So that's the comparison I have to Newark. Any questions? Okay.
Good start. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk about New Orleans, and I've got 3 quick slides to show while we're talking, because I did want everybody to see what I was struggling to figure out how I was going to describe here. So while we're bringing those up, I'll just say the New Orleans disciplinary matrix that I reviewed was from June of 2024. I do think it's a good policy for Minneapolis to consider as we're hopefully trying to improve the draft that we have in front of us. One important point I would note, I looked at the history of the New Orleans consent decree and kind of the process they've been through to figure out where this disciplinary matrix falls in that process. And actually, the New Orleans investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice goes back to 2010. So I think it's important to note in everything I'm going to say with what are largely compliments of the New Orleans disciplinary matrix that they're much further along in their evolution, but maybe that means we can learn from them. The other thing that struck me as I was reviewing this is I looked at the rules that the disciplinary matrix applies to. So that is, kind of the New Orleans version of the policy and procedure manual that we're used to seeing in review panels when there's an allegation that there's been a violation. The New Orleans police rules are much, much, much more streamlined than the Minneapolis version. And that's maybe a corollary point I wanted to make with, outside the scope of what we're talking about tonight, but they have essentially 7 rules. Now, there are a lot of subparts, and it's not 7 pages, but it's much shorter than the policy manual that we're accustomed to seeing, and I think that helps them make all of this more understandable and more straightforward. Okay, so if we could go to the next slide. This disciplinary matrix on the right side, this is the whole disciplinary matrix for New Orleans. That's why I wanted you all to see it, right? Because we have a huge multi-page version that grows in every revision. So it takes a while to understand what these abbreviations are, so I'm going to quickly describe them. So first, notice on the left side, you've got levels A through G, so they have 7 levels of violations as opposed to our 5. And then you also see the first through fifth offense matrix across the top. So just off the bat, my first impression was this does a much better job of just very clearly putting you in a specific box based on the level of the offense and which offense number this is. So then in terms of the abbreviations that are in there, there is a code or a key over to the left side here, but like in the first box up there for level A, first offense, the O refers to an oral reprimand, the R refers to a letter of reprimand, and then any place you see a number, that is the number of days of suspension, that is the presumption. In Minneapolis, we're used to seeing hours of suspension, but New Orleans uses days. The reason that most of these boxes have 3 choices with dashes in between them is because it's the middle one that's the presumption, the first one listed is the lower end, and the third one listed is the higher end. So once you know that, right, this is all very easy to decode. They've got their 7 levels of offenses, and you can see the minimum, maximum, and presumptive level for each level. And the only thing I haven't covered is for those where you see a D, that's either discharge or demotion. It can be either one. And where you see a /D, that is a special category, which I also kind of like having this option available. The /D means where there is what they define as egregious conduct, and that is a defined term. That allows them the possibility of demotion or dismissal even where it otherwise wouldn't be an option. Okay, so I know we weren't necessarily supposed to give you that much detail about each city, but I really like the clarity, the conciseness of this, and so I wanted to explain that. And if we go to my last slide, the other thing that I really like and is an important point to go along with all this is, let me explain what's on the slide, then I'll tell you the importance of it. So on the right side, that's a sample page of what they're calling the penalty schedule. So attached to the discipline matrix, you've got the penalty schedule. On the left side, I just blew up so that it would be a little bit easier to read the top section of one page. But they've got about 15 pages of this that covers any violation within their rules. So the important distinction between what we have in Minneapolis and this version is every single potential violation that they can come up with is listed kind of in the order that the rules proceed, and then it gives a single specific level for each offense. In our proposed matrix, we continue to have a range of levels for what are just examples. So we don't have specific violations, and we have a range for every one, which is why we get to review panels. And we often, somebody's suggesting it could be a, merit for a violation, but they think it's a B level. Somebody else thinks there's merit, but it could be a C level, and somebody else thinks maybe it's A, right? This puts it in a specific level for every violation, and that, in my mind, is the point of the matrix and this idea to kind of direct us. And so I'll leave it at that because I know I went into a lot of detail, but I liked all of these features in New Orleans.
Thank you. I was in charge of doing Cleveland matrix, and what I found, the difference between Minneapolis and Cleveland is Cleveland's proposed discipline is only 10 pages. And it was very vague. And what I mean by vague, it tried to explain every different scenarios, but then it also gave the police chief some more discretionary than what the new copy was meant for us. It also, for ours in Cleveland, what I didn't like was the fact that, like I said, it was so vague, and then it went off into the violations, but then it was violation 1, but except for, it just went on and on and on. So it was very hard to read and to comprehend how a person would be disciplined. As opposed to ours, the draft one, it is somewhat clear, but I do agree with the others is that it's just too much for as discipline. And then I found in ours that there was like, failure to make required notification to supervisor for a level 2 use of force, and it was just like, whoa. But that's, on one page it was, a B, and then on another it could be considered a C. It was just, I thought it was just a bit too much. That's what I've taken away from comparing the two. And I think we do need to streamline it a bit more than what it has been drafted. Thank you.
Sure. Before I talk about Baltimore, I just want to, so I don't forget, I just want to thank Mr. Bicking for his comments. We've been in a lot of meetings together over the last 2.5 years. This is, and I often find him to be very wise and thoughtful, and he brings a welcome history. This is the first time, though, I agreed with him 100% on everything he said. So I just want to thank him for that. I did look at Baltimore, and as you might expect, the theme is similar. It's based on pretty much the same template as Minneapolis. Baltimore's, again, as is a common theme, is not as detailed as Minneapolis. There's more broad categories. There's probably a total of half as many pages in Baltimore's, but it operates pretty much the same way, and it has 6 levels of discipline rather than 5. And in some cases, I mean, we could go point by point. I don't think we want to do that now. In some cases, they treat offenses more seriously than Minneapolis. For example, pursuit violations and insubordination are treated much more seriously. But for the most part, they're fairly similar. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you for the background, and I'll just add a couple thoughts about the Albuquerque approach to discipline. So similar to Newark, they've been under consent decree for many years, or New Orleans rather. They became under consent decree in 2014, and actually in May of this year they filed a motion with the court to get out from underneath the review of the DOJ. So I thought that, assuming that is heads in that same direction, that we should be taking direction from cities like that who have successfully, or who will successfully complete all of the requirements of their settlement or consent decree or settlement agreement. So in Albuquerque, I'll share 4 things. The first is that the Civilian Police Oversight Agency is similar to us. I think perhaps it's a bit more robust, but they, like us, review and investigate complaints of alleged misconduct, and they forward the findings to the Internal Affairs, which is a little different than our setup, and the chain of command for further action, including disciplinary action if the complaint is sustained. So they're involved a bit earlier in the process. And the final decision regarding discipline still rests with the chief of police, as it does here, but their recommendations and findings play a significant role in informing that decision. And as the public comment, Mr. Bicking noted, that's not listed here in the matrix at all. In the MPD discipline matrix, it doesn't mention that the review panels are part of the process as well. So those are two differences. And then I also found it interesting, similar again to New Orleans, where there is a very clear matrix. Each class of violation carries a minimum, a presumptive, and a maximum penalty. So very similar to the slide we just saw, where there are first offense, second offense, third offense across the top, and the class of violation along the left hand on the rows, and it's very clear and easy to use. The other piece I thought that was quite interesting was that their non-disciplinary corrective action, an action other than discipline taken to enable and encourage an officer to improve his or her performance, they make really clearly in their discipline language that cannot be used in lieu of discipline when the chart of sanctions calls for the imposition of discipline, if there's a finding of merit of a policy violation. I think that's something for us to consider as well. So with that, I wanted to just draw people's attention to a couple pieces around the MPD matrix as we open up the mics for discussion.
Yes. Let's open up for discussion, so we're on the next agenda item. And Commissioner Shanfield can start.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Sure. So there are a fair amount of similarities and of the old version and the new version. As many people have noted, it's a lot longer. There's a famous quote, I might get it wrong, but it was one of the forefathers who said something about, "I'm sorry, I didn't have time to write a short document. I only had time to write the long one." I think it is harder to write a short thing than a long one. So my view is that this 24-page, 23-page document we have here is a first draft, and that we could do a lot to help make it more streamlined and shorter and easier to use and to read. The 2025, this new draft, is broader, yet more detailed and a bit more prescriptive. The progressive discipline structure is the same. Both the old version and the new version have this 5-category A through E system. There's a consideration in both that of mitigating and aggravating factors. The role of the chief with final disciplinary discretion is clear in both, with an expectation that deviations from presumptive outcomes are justified and documented. In this new matrix, it does note that there are a requirement for further documentation of departure from original discipline. Let me see if I can find that for you real quick. Sorry. So in the original version, or in the 2023 version, each level lists typical violations and a single disciplinary range. In the new version, B, C, and D, under presumptive discipline, it also has minimum and maximum ranges, an explicit structure for offensive, first, second, and third, and the progression path. And category E is always discharge and termination. What this new version doesn't take into account is that on panels, we don't have access to the first, second, and third offenses, correct? And so there's not a use for us in the panels with this new version to be able to say how to use it. We, I guess, could look at the upper left-hand box where it says first violation, and then the lower right-hand box, it says go to category C for B. That would maybe give us a sense, written reprimand all the way to 30 hours, but it would be really a lot better if it was clearly spelled out. Here is what category B entails, the lowest, the highest, or the minimum, maximum, and then the middle. Both frameworks emphasize procedural justice, which I think is important. And there's more clarity in the longer version. However, I don't know if it's much more useful. So I'd love to hear what people's thoughts are. Any sort of things that look, things that you notice that are useful, and then also concerns that you have, both about what's in the matrix and then its utility as well.
Commissioners, are there any thoughts? Anyone? Questions, comments?
I'm curious if we want to start a document or something where we list concerns and comments, and then, like, we can say, hey, I'd like to add my name, not name, but like emphasize the ones that are most important or something. I'm concerned about just it being a dialogue, and then what is the clear resolution that what our recommendations are?
Linda, I'm assuming that you guys are taking, or city clerk, taking some.
Yeah, city staff are taking notes. I also do want to point out that if you would like to project a specific page, please let me know. I'm sitting up here, so folks in the audience can also see what you're referencing.
Okay.
Okay.
And we will take
Chair Reeves, I apologize. May I interject one more point of information? Just a reminder to all of you that because this is a special meeting of the full body, we are recording and broadcasting. So you also will have that option that the video recording could be reviewed for specificity at a later time.
Thank you. Any Commissioner Kennedy?
So just to amplify the point that although I think it's a positive development that we kind of have clear presumptive minimum and maximum ranges on the page that's being displayed right now as an example for category B, that's not information that we have, and as far as I know, that's not anticipated that we would have it in a panel. Another way that I noticed this when reviewing the draft is on page 1 in the introduction. The final paragraph of the introduction speaks to kind of the importance of this document. It says, this below matrix is meant to be a transparent guide for the chief of police to issue corrective action in a fair and consistent manner. That's not wrong, but it does leave out the role that CCPO has in the review panels, and where we have both civilian and sworn officers looking at this and determining if there are merit to charges. And it just feels like in reviewing this that we at least don't have a clear answer as to how that would be used during the time of our role in review panels. So I think that would be one area where this could be improved.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Olson, Vice Chair Olson.
I agree with Commissioners Shanfield and Kennedy. It seems to me that this is not written at all for us. It is written solely for the chief of police. And one of the ways you can tell is all the aggravating and mitigating factors that are listed on pages, 4 and 5, very few of them we have access to, or is it appropriate for us? So we can't evaluate the whole of the conduct. Then it's also really, I find it really, I'm going to go in a different direction, I find it much less useful than the previous versions of the matrix we've had. The versions that have worked best in our panels, and we've had the benefit of seeing a lot of different versions in the panels because so many of the cases are so old. But the ones that specifically referred to policies and gave you a baseline are the ones that are useful for us. And here we have so many of these violations that are described that we have no idea really where they fall. If you look at on page 10, use of discretion, which we see a lot in our review panels, it can be anywhere from a B to an E. And so what is a panelist supposed to do with that? Not knowing any mitigating factors, not knowing any aggravating factors, we just have to guess or just, say what we think. This doesn't provide us any guidance. A third major issue I have with this, and this is could be more, biting off more than we can chew. But I do not think that a discipline matrix for us should have a category A, a non-disciplinary outcome, because when you get a non-disciplinary outcome, nobody will ever see it. It is protected by the Data Practices Act, and whether it's a panelists that decide that it's going to be a merit A, or if the chief decides later on, which is even worse, we could have a panel that says merit B or merit C. The chief could say, no, I think it's a merit A because of mitigating factors, and nobody will ever know. So I don't think that it is consistent with transparency and accountability to have a category that is secret. So those are my first overall comments, and I don't want to dominate the discussion now, so
Okay.
let others.
Anyone else? Make sure I'm not missing hands. Commissioner Palmer.
Yeah, I was looking over this myself, and I have to agree with a lot of the other commissioners as well as members of the public that this really just isn't very good. Like, this is just lacking a lot of the information that we need. It really isn't very clear at all. One thing I did notice, some of these examples they give, they don't refer to policy, which makes it very difficult to determine exactly how that should be done. And, you know, I've yet to serve on a review panel as I'm still a new member myself. So I was not aware until now that we don't even have access to some of this information, which I don't understand how this would help us at all if we can't even determine what that is. But another thing that really caught my attention was on page 16, the rending medical aid violations. The third example that's listed there, willful failure to render or obtain any necessary emergency medical care whenever a person is injured, complains of injury or illness, or requests medical attention consistent with training where the officer knew or should have known there was a reasonable chance of death or great bodily harm. Continues from page 16 to page 17. It has two options on there. One is Class E, which is termination of the officer. I think that's a fair judgment for letting someone die. But it also has Class D as an option, which, with mitigating factors, the minimum for that is a 30-hour suspension. I don't think that that is a fair assessment of an officer who just lets someone die from not rendering medical aid. And I bring this one up because this happened almost exactly to what this example says recently in the Native community in South Minneapolis, where a man named Randy Rousset was overdosing. Bystanders requested police provide Narcan to them. They refused to do so, and then Randy Rousset died. They were 17. Furthermore, they're also related to the Lucier family, who also previously spoke to the CCPO at the February meeting and other meetings before about police misconduct and their failures to protect and properly investigate the death of Allison Lucier. So I just want to bring that up, that some of these examples in here, not only does this matrix not help us in a review panel, but some of these exact examples that they are giving have currently happened, and there's still not much going for it, not much anything to provide justice or accountability for any of the families or accountability for the officers, any of it. And I think it's just shameful that some of these examples of what not to do are currently happening right now. So I do think that, kind of agreeing with other commissioners' thoughts and then from members of the public, that this needs to be redrafted. This is not a good matrix. This does not compare well to hardly any of the other cities that we've seen the policy committee present to us in regards to their discipline matrices. It's just kind of pathetic, really. I don't really have much else to say.
Okay, thank you. I'll put myself in queue. I appreciate all the comments. I agree and with Mr. Bicking and various other. It is a lot of information. Someone who's looked at policy manuals that are hundreds of pages, though, I find this quite short. But I will say, though, we wanted to make sure that the officers that are able to discern what's in the policy manual, that they're able to interpret it, they're able to understand it, and they can remember it. There's a lot of information going on here. In the panels, we're able to do mitigating and aggravating factors, but that's based on the information that we have in the panel. The fact that this discipline matrix allows aggravating and mitigating factors based on the number of potential violations in the past, that's information that we don't have. So it makes it hard for the recommendations of the panels to stand, and we're probably always going to see, if this discipline matrix stands, of deviations from the recommendations from the panels, and that defeats the purpose of CCPO. I don't know if that is doing a separate matrix to make it easier for us to discern in panels, something that's easier. I do like Commissioner Kennedy's sheet here. Did you make this sheet? Very nice, I like this. This first page of the disciplinary matrix, when it has the offenses listed, I think this is very easy to read. But I'm also someone who's a visual and likes to see examples, and I can appreciate those officers that may want to see, if this happens, what will this look like? So maybe they could be in conjunction with each other, right? Because then we have to understand that the officers discern information differently. So if I can look at handling of evidence, and I can look, if I do this, I know exactly what the example is. So maybe having two versions, one for some people that look at it in one way and those that want to see more examples. I think there's benefit in both. I do recognize that it is long, but also recognize that some people like things spelled out succinctly when it comes to a policy violation. I've been a union president for a long time, and I know that just seems to be easier when you're violating policy, that you can go straight to it and say, you know what, there's a violation here, as opposed to trying to guess. So I do like potentially both versions, having something that is shorter, easier for officers to be able to discern. I think it was the Portland one that passed around that had 2 pages. I really like that. That's something they can carry that on them at some point, put it in their car. But also having one that's more detailed for those that learn and visualize things differently. Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, what I would add to talking about Portland is at the end of their table, they do have some explanations, some directions. I would suggest that, Minneapolis would benefit by, first of all, if they keep this table consolidated a lot, basically look at Portland's. It's pretty good. And then and take some of the good explanations that are a little bit lengthy and annex it all. And then reference it keep an introduction page and reference the annexes in the introduction. So that, if somebody needs a refresher or a civilian wants to see what something means, they can look it up. Thanks.
Anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry, did I miss someone? Yes, that's it.
Yeah, just kind of adding on to some of the other comments is like looking at the category A, my concern there is that those categories don't matter. They're not actually rules. If the worst you can do is after 3 violations, you can get a note about it. So like something like that is like especially with the amount of discretion that we have in it, we're really creating some problematic situations where you're going to see bias and other concerns that are problematic with the union there. With that, I do like having the long comments and the explanations in some of this, but it does add complexity to the document itself and the matrix itself. My concern is something in Dungeons and Dragons, we call it rule lawyering. And this is having unnecessary complexity in here where people can just craft their special phrasing of situations to get around it, and they can say that I'm 100% in compliance with the disciplinary matrix based on magical wording. And kind of when we have too much opportunity for that in there, we're not even requiring a downward departure. We're just saying, oh no, the CCPO is wrong. So that is a concern there. That said, it seems like there needs to be some sort of connection between the actual policy, numbers, and the policy and this matrix itself. So whether the policy says this or there's a sub-document saying this is the policy number, this is the matrix identification, and then there can be like a high, medium, low or something like that. Based on it could be some of the wording that we use to kind of convey our concerns with there. And I think those are my primary concerns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shanfield.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone's thoughts. Another question I'd like us to wrestle with here is what would make it more useful for us? So we've talked a little bit about policy numbers, a little bit about length. What other things would make this useful during a panel?
Anyone have any thoughts? I guess for those that have sat on panels, it might be an easier question.
Yes, good point.
Yeah. I think Commissioner Candy touched on it in terms of the aggravating and mitigating, and the fact that there's 3 or 4 choices for a discipline. It would be easier. Someone has just letters. New Orleans has just letters, 1 letter. That would be easier. What that would look like, I think it'll be easier for the chief to have a memo to say, if the panel says B and I say C or A, we'll say C. Let's say he goes up. Then he can clearly discern what it is and how he mitigated from the panel by just having B. When we have a panel with 3 sworn or 3 civilian, 2 sworn, we may be all over the place. And so I think that's also, it make it easier for the chief to make a decision too, based on what the panel's actual recommendations are. If we all have a different letter, it makes it very challenging. So, my thoughts. Anyone else?
I think identifying a presumptive penalty as opposed to a range B to E would be much more helpful for us.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Commissioner
It begs
Champion?
the question, too, if there's very clear, like the few matrices that we've seen here that have very clear, if this, then this, then the role of the panel is a little different. The role of the panel is not to determine, is this a B or a C or a D, but the role of the panel is to decide, is this the minimum or the medium or the maximum? Really, the discipline is what we're recommending as opposed to the category. Am I understanding people's thoughts? I'd love to hear if anyone wants to build on that.
Yes, because then when we're making the decision, we can argue time as opposed to letter. And I think that would be more helpful when we're doing the panels. I do like the idea of a range. It kind of reminds me of the sentencing guidelines where you have a range. You have a middle and you have 2 on the side. It's very simple to see. You can go to the box, follow the line, and there you are. And I think that would be an easier way. So if you had a presumptive in the middle, you had a mitigating and aggravating based on what we see, we use that to make a determination to the chief. I think it would be easier, in my humble opinion. Commissioner Baker.
To have both the category and a range, it you expand the range so far beyond any consistency. And so, yeah, I agree that there's going to always have to be some discretion in range. We understand that, but let's do that in 1 variable rather than 2 variables that just spread it out much wider.
Yep. All right. Commissioner Shanfield.
That's a good point, Commissioner Baker. That would also then help with the consistency, right? Because as Mr. Bicking noted, like part of the goal of the matrix would be so that there is consistency if anything is grieved, and that there's really clear steps. It makes it much more enforceable when there's clarity and specificity. I guess my next wondering for the group here is. How might we improve the consistency in here? Are there other ways that we could think of that would tighten the language or improve the use so that this is employed the same for everybody? Because we do want equitable or equal, rather, treatment of officers. One challenge that I've noticed as serving on the panels is that we don't have background information, much like a jury, right? But the sworn members, to their credit, do their best to sort of navigate between what they know in the field and their experience, and also who they know. And they're trying to sort of take those hats on and off. And I've noticed that that's a challenge. That's something that they do bring the background knowledge. They do sort of know if this is the person's first offense or not, even if they're not sort of offering that out loud, as they shouldn't. But I think that something like this would make it much clearer so that we aren't then determining whether it's first, second, or third. Curious what others think.
Anyone else? Commissioner Palmer.
Yeah, I do have to say, like, it would be a lot more helpful to us, one, if we can know if what how many times this violation has occurred with an officer, and that I certainly think if other officers know that, they should be transparent with that in a review panel to allow for an appropriate decision to be made. I think the biggest thing with correcting the language of this policy needs to be cited for each one of these examples, I think. Because if we're just left to guess about whatever the hell is happening, that's not going to result in a good review panel. That's not going to result in a fair decision for civilians, officers, however you choose to see it. We need something that is clear and concise. Each one of these has to refer back to a specific policy. There shouldn't be any guessing. There should just be a review. I think another thing is that some of these, they really need to consider, I think, some of the more human impact that these violations would have on the victims of any police violence or misconduct. Like, for example, the rending medical aid violation I cited earlier. Like a 30-hour suspension for letting someone die, because that's effectively what that violation is. I'm not entirely sure that that is fair. I think that's not fair to the person that they let die from failing to rend medical aid. I think some of these violations, depending on the severity of actions on the victim of this violation, whoever it may be, I think some of the punishments for them should be much more reflective of that and much more reciprocal based on the violence that would be enacted out or the failure to respond properly as acted out.
Commissioner Palmer, were you done speaking?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll note at the policy that Commissioner Palmer is speaking of the willful failure to render or obtain any necessary emergency medical care. I see this as multiple things in one policy. So the range from D to E, complaints of illness or injury is separate from the most egregious, which is the death of someone because of inaction. So I do know that there is a range here. But Ms. Polini, if you could just help us in terms of the conversation, when we're talking about the review panels and what information is shared in terms of previous offenses, if you could just put on the record, just so everyone is aware, those are not on panels, what does it look like for previous violations?
Is this on? Yes, sorry. You are given a case file that's specific to the instance in front of you because the idea is to apply consistent, recommend consistent discipline based on the violation before you, which, for lack of a better term, can feel like a vacuum, but the idea is to be able to assess it consistently across. So prior offenses are taken into account, but they are taken into account by the chief. And subsequent, arbitration, grievance, et cetera. But at the panel level, that is not in the case file.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shanfield.
I'm curious, Ms. Polini, if you see that would ever change, because it sort of renders our view and our recommendations moot.
I have no idea. That's certainly something that you guys can, use your different discussions to recommend or to discuss or to consider. I am not aware at the current second of that being the case. My current understanding is that you continue to be looking at the violations as they come before you, applying the discipline according to that specific violation at that time, and then mitigating and aggravating factors are taken into account after the facts, like blue cards and whatnot.
Would it be possible to follow up at a later date so we can discuss whether or not it even would be possible for us to have access to that information? Because I understand there's personnel data there too, but it would be helpful to understand whether that's a recommendation we could make, for example, when the city council looks at the ordinance.
Sure, we can definitely follow up on that.
Commissioner Baker.
It seems to me that, on the same vein, that in an ideal world, the chief's decision would match the review panels as often as feasible, and to have some of the things that go into the discipline recommendation not even be available, but to be making a discipline recommendation, inherently is going to create more of a rupture there, which undermines some of our community engagement and outreach and making it look like we are providing effective. So having a procedure where I mean, I'm thinking of like criminal justice where there is the finding of guilty or not, and then there is a sentencing, and maybe those two things need to be teased out a little bit separately so that the CCPO, the review panels are making a recommendation based on the facts that they have available, but not guessing at what the other facts might be that would change that recommendation. So for instance, if you said there is a finding of merit of a violation of D, maybe we don't recommend what the punishment is because that needs that additional piece of information or something. But to have us recommending what that punishment should be when we don't have that information just feels like a recipe for there to be a rupture there that undermines the whole aspect of it. That wasn't as articulate as
Commissioner Kennedy.
I have a different topic, so if I don't want to interrupt the conversation.
Commissioner Vice Chair Olson.
I agree, and I'll note that this separation of our responsibilities, or the fact that we don't get the full information, is not in our ordinance. It just says we should make a discipline recommendation. It doesn't say that we should make it on limited information.
Okay. Commissioner Baker.
So, I mean, is that something that as a committee we want to make a, request for a change or make a motion at some point? Not that I have the exact solution for that, but like, if it's an existing problem, let's figure out what we think the solution might be and put that forward.
I think it'd be helpful for city staff to make note of that as a thing to move forward and ask questions on. And I think it is important because we want the CCPO panels to be as effective as possible. We know that the community has an expectation that we are able to do what they have asked us to do. What I will say about the discipline matrix as it currently sits, listing the violations first, second, and third, it is very challenging to have it listed in that manner because, again, we're going to find the chief will deviate almost every time we make a recommendation. And so if my question then becomes, what is the purpose of this matrix? Is it just for the chief to be able to have a guide? If he says first, second, and third violation, this is what he needs to do. Should this be for him? Should we have something for the public that they can digest in terms of categories A, B, C, D, and E, what it will look like in terms of the CCPO? I think it needs to be as simple as possible for the public, therefore for us. But I think he can have recommendations if there's a first, second, or third violation. If we don't get access to the information, then he can make a determination. But I don't know if we need to have this information. Maybe that's the part we should have a conversation about. Because again, if I'm looking at this and I've sit on several panels, I'm trying to figure out where does my recommendation fit. And if this is a third violation, I just recommend a B, and it's probably a D. And so I've just wasted many, many hours in making a recommendation. It's a lot of hours per panel. So I want to give kudos to the commissioners and those that will do panels. It's a lot of time that they spend to do panels, 5, 6, 10, 12 hours on one case. It is a lot of time to do all of that work and then know that you're almost always going to be overturned by the chief based on this discipline matrix. Is not fun. I think we need to figure out a way to make it simple. Maybe he has something that he uses as his guide, and then we have something that the public can digest and CCPO can use for the panels. Maybe they should be two different things. He can use it as just a reference for himself. They say the same thing, but they look different in terms of how the output for us to review. Anyone else? Commissioner Williams.
Yeah, I agree, because when I was reading the draft, I was kind of confused on violation 1, 2, and 3. I'm thinking, well, if he's getting a violation 2, what, I personally agree with you, Commissioner, that I think this is really written for the police chief, not for the public and for us. I think we should have should be the same, but looking at different things, because it is a bit confusing.
Anyone else? Commissioner Kennedy.
Thank you. So I'm going to quickly make 2 points that have come up with various things that have been said this evening. So first, I want to remind everybody, I think all the commissioners received this as a public comment about 3 weeks ago in our email. We received some comments from CUAPB with some analysis of, if I remember right, the Vancouver disciplinary matrix that were prepared a couple of years ago. I'm reminding us all because that's another city that I think we've looked at as part of this discussion, and I did look back at that as I was looking at the New Orleans example. I won't pretend to remember everything that was in there, but it did make a number of the comments we're talking about tonight, which is why I think it'll be helpful for the committee to look at that again. The necessity of it being clear, being concise, the benefit of having a clear, concise statement for arbitration proceedings, et cetera. The second point, so I'm going back to New Orleans again. You can tell I like the policy. So something I didn't bring up, but I actually think has been raised here tonight, the concern about Category A and coaching and the way that that works in Minneapolis. One thing that's in the New Orleans policy that I think we could consider as feedback for this version we're looking at is New Orleans has something called education-based discipline. So this is not a separate or lesser category of violation, but this is an option available for the chief to essentially, and I'm greatly summarizing it here, right, because I didn't prepare to talk about this tonight, but my understanding was it takes away some of the discipline that would otherwise be imposed and swaps it out for specific education. That would solve some of the problem that came up here tonight, where whenever discipline is opted, it's kind of in its own category and it becomes something that's not public, and so there's no transparency about it. So my understanding, again, of the New Orleans policy is the discipline could still be imposed according to the 7 levels that they have of discipline, but some of what otherwise might be a suspension, for example, is replaced by a certain number of hours of training. And the policy does make specific requirements about what the panel should consider in making that decision. So it looks like there are 5 different categories of things to consider, including like what education is available, have there been previous violations, et cetera. So this whole framework, I think, would be an improvement over the concerns we heard tonight about our Category A, and just wanted to add that to the discussion.
Just a note, CUAPB did submit something in writing, and that may be helpful to be added to the public comment because there was some very good points in there. And so I would invite CUAPB, the letter that they submitted on this topic, to put it in public comments. I think it would be nice for everyone to see it. Commissioner Champion.
I wanted to lift up a couple things that I've heard as well. Commissioner Kennedy, you make a great point. In a couple panels I've sat on, we have said, a letter of reprimand and or suspension, those are the only options we have to recommend. Why can't we recommend more training or more support, and not just existing trainings, but other kinds of training, or some de-escalation training, for example, like they use in education, or other types of training that we could recommend based on things that we're seeing. And while we don't take into account for second or third violations, we do sometimes see an officer come before us more than once. And so those are the times when we might be able to say, hey, this problem needs to be corrected, not just disciplined. And I think there's some real value in that. And then I wanted to lift up what Commissioner Williams-Johnson mentioned about first, second, and third. We don't want to have officers who have a second and third violation. We don't want that to be the case. So this matrix sort of suggests that that's normal, and I don't think that's helpful. We really want to have this to be a very uncommon process, that people don't come before the panel, officers don't come before the panel very frequently, especially not a second or third or more times. The last thing I'd like to bring forward is on page 2 at the very bottom, and then on page 3. So in the new draft, the very last line on page 2 says the chief may not impose only non-disciplinary corrective action where, based on the individual facts and circumstances of a case, the discipline matrix calls for discipline. I think that's really powerful and it's important, but our matrix right now doesn't make that clear enough. There are no cases that I could understand. We'll welcome feedback or pushback on that, but I don't think that there's anything yet that only calls for discipline. There's always a Category A option, to your point. So I think that could use some clarification. And then the last sentence of that paragraph says, any departures from the presumptive discipline, including any downward departure from the minimum discipline, shall be justified based on the facts and circumstances of the situation and documented in writing by the MPD chief. I'd like to suggest, and I'd like to see there more detail in this particular document that says where that goes in writing, if it is able to be accessed by CCPO, if that information would be able to come back to us, because we don't know, to date, we haven't been able to understand any departures by the chief. We don't know whether or not what we have recommended has been imposed and/or any departures. So this new matrix makes it a little bit more explicit that especially downward departures, need to be documented, but I'd like it to say where and whom can access that documentation.
All right, anyone else? Not seeing any hands. Are there any other comments? Commissioner Kennedy, did you have something else on a different topic? Okay. Okay. Commissioner McElhaney.
Yeah, just so one comment that I have on this is a lot of this is we are looking at the behaviors that happen, and what we're not disciplining is essentially who they happen to. So to that, if I have inappropriate use of force against me or inappropriate use of force against my 2.5-year-old toddler, the impact is going to be different, and the impact on our communities and some of these challenged groups is particularly more impactful sometimes than others. And what this doesn't really account for is the creation of generational trauma, the creation of more long-term impacts, and that is something where I don't know the answer to this, but I think it's something important, whether I think of sentencing guidelines and how if I hurt somebody, I get punishment A, but if I hurt somebody while also committing a crime and carrying a weapon, I get punishment C. And something like that, where there's got to be some sort of way, more problems without answers. How can we look at focusing more on the results than the behavior sometimes?
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I'll just add to Commissioner Shanfield's comments. I think insubordination is one that does not have an A category. So I think there is a couple things in there that don't have an A, no coaching for that. But potentially, yes, true. Commissioners, Vice Chair Olson.
Just a couple really granular thoughts. I think the penalties for pursuit violations are way too low. Both initiating a pursuit against policy and failure to terminate a pursuit after loss of visual contact for a significant amount of time are both A and B level offenses. I think pursuits are extremely dangerous, and I think this matrix should treat them more seriously.
Thank you. Ms. Bellini.
So I just want to encourage you, as we talk about in the PPRR meetings, try to be more pointed. So it's helpful if your comment is pursuits should be higher than A or B, great. What should they be? Like help walk it a little bit further. Like, what do you think it should be? Because that is the helpful stuff that MPD can use.
Sure. They shouldn't be an A, a B, or a C.
Certainly shouldn't. They should not be a possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Shanfield.
Yeah, you're making me think, Commissioner Olson, that perhaps one next step for PPRR might be to go through this and remove anything that we don't think would ever warrant an A, and that might be a useful thing for us to make concrete and recommend. I'm just saying that out loud so that I remember to do that.
Okay, sounds good. Anyone else? So with all the recommendations, is there anything else anyone can think of as we present this group's recommendations to the city regarding what we think the matrix should be? We've said a lot today. We've said it's too long, doesn't have policy numbers, needs to be easier to read and digest. Maybe this version is not for the public. We need something that's easier for the public to be able to digest. Anything else that we can think of that we want to submit as a possible recommendation? Commissioner Kennedy.
I have one more thought. This sounds very non-substantive, but I actually think it's an important suggestion. I think a graphic designer improving the document once the substance is improved would improve its readability for the public, for officers, for us, for everybody. And I was kind of saving it to the end and considering not saying it because I know it's the least important in a sense, but I actually do think it would help with the comprehension. And it's not just like not great right now, it's really, really bad because, I mean, the categories don't even repeat from one page to the other about what the columns are, et cetera. It's very difficult to understand right now.
I have to say, as someone who loves color, I completely concur. Everything needs to be in color. So, Commissioner Sheffield.
Yeah, one other concrete solution or suggestion, thanks for saying that, Commissioner Kennedy, is on, let's see, any of the pages with the categories. So for example, on page 6 or 7, an additional row here. If this is the only document, to your point, Chair, earlier, it might be useful to have a separate document for panels, but if this is the only document, then we do need another row here. So something where it says first violation, written reprimand, 10-hour suspension. Something above that says if you don't know how many violations, here is the minimum, the middle, and the maximum, or much like the other matrices. But that has then something that's useful to the panel directly.
Okay. Anyone else? Commissioner Sheffield.
I'd like to make a motion that we take the notes from tonight and the video as well and bring them to PPRR on Monday, 8/25, and then synthesize those and submit them in a coherent manner on behalf of the body. I'd like to ask to make the motion that we could do that.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
I heard a second. All right. Any further discussion? All right, seeing no further discussion, do we need the motion repeated, or everyone good?
Can I discuss for a second?
Yes.
I will say this is not in lieu of individuals in the audience or on the dais here. Also submitting your comments, anything that stood out to you is really important, via email directly to policepolicyfeedback@minneapolismitten.gov.
Okay, thank you. Clerk, if you can call the roll.
Commissioner McElhenney? This is to refer all of the collective thoughts to the PPRR to be able to submit it as for the group.
Aye.
Shanfield?
Aye.
Palmer?
Aye.
Baker?
Aye.
Zyla?
Aye.
Kennedy?
Aye.
Bartz?
Aye.
Williams Johnson?
Aye.
Vice Chair Olson?
Aye.
And Chair Reeves.
Aye.
There are 10 ayes.
Thank you very much. I would also ask the clerk to receive and file the previous report as well. And so, seeing that we have that done, this has been a productive discussion. Thank you to everyone. I really appreciate it. PPRR members through Chair Shanfield will compile our feedback into a document to submit on our behalf. That document will be attached to the minutes of this meeting and circulated to the body via email by staff liaison Ms. Zhang. Please note the document will be circulated for information purposes only, not for any additional feedback. With that being said, I invite a motion to approve the submission of our community recommendations, which we've already done, so we'll pass that. And I think that we are adjourned. If there's nothing else, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much. Oh, Ms. Polini, did you?
I just want to remind everybody, August 29th, the feedback is due. If you'd like to give feedback, it's available on the form online, or you can send in an email. And then the PPRR, what everybody's been referring to here today, is at 6 p.m. this coming Monday in the Public Service Building, the new building, not this one. So I'll trust it to you.
All right, thank you. All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate your hard work.